Hello, my friends. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, whatever time it is for you. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Spiritism, a closer look. You are on Kardec Radio, and I am Luiz Lima, your host for tonight. I'm giving you down here on your screen the contacts, how you can reach us, how you can talk to us with questions, comments, suggestions, including topics that you want us to discuss here on the program. We are here every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, Spiritism, a closer look. Tonight, we are going to take a closer look at what we call false Christs. False Christs. So the first thing that comes in mind is, what is this? Right? What does exactly means? Okay, let me, before we get into this, this is one of the things that is discussed right here on the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 21. In this chapter, there's a very interesting message signed by Spirit St. Louis about false Christs. What exactly does it mean? What it entails? What is it about? The general idea behind what we call a false Christ is somebody, a spirit that could be discarnate or not, could be incarnate or discarnate, but it's a spirit that supposedly brings us good teachings supported by Christ. They claim to be, uh, associated somehow directly or indirectly with Jesus. So they will bring their messages, their thoughts, which are actually personal opinions, not really Jesus' teachings. But some of these spirits, some of these people, when they're incarnate, they're very convincing, very we could use a modern term, very marketing oriented, and a lot of us buy the idea, and then we listen to them, and we divert from. We ended up diverting from the original message brought to us by Jesus. So that's the general idea behind it. So let's begin by saying this: us spiritists, to be a spiritist, to begin with, we need to believe in Jesus and his teachings. So we are Christians in that sense, that we believe in Jesus Christ and all his teachings, his messages, everything that he taught, that he brought to us. And that becomes very interesting, because if we go back to the early days of Christianity, just go back 2,000 years ago. Let's go back to Jesus walking through Palestine or Galilee, whatever he was, walking with a lot of people, the disciples, and a lot of people around them, because that's what it was. Wherever he went, he would just take a lot of people with him. They would follow him. So in these early days or early years, I would say, of Christianity, the teachings of Jesus, they took place in person. That was him, himself, incarnated, walking through the streets of Jerusalem, and so in person. So he was doing this himself until the crucifixion. After the crucifixion, we have, I would say, the first generation, which are the 12 apostles and those close followers that really understood the message and the idea behind it, and that he was here to teach something at the moral level. So that's the first generation. But after the first generation, the teachings had to be passed along. And they were passed along through initially influential individuals. Influential individuals. But for the most part, they were passed along by the church, at least in its great part by the church. Why do I make a distinction here between influential individuals in the church. Because something happens in the year 140, so that is about 100 years after Jesus' passing. And this guy comes on board, Marcion. Okay, he was a very successful businessman. He used to sell yachts in modern day Greece through those islands and so. So he was very, very successful. One day he said, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to kind of retire from that activity, and I want to move to Rome, and I want to be a religious figure, a famous religious figure. So he goes to Rome, talk to the people in power, explains his situation, what I'm telling you. And he said, I want to be, a priest or somebody, a bishop, actually. That's what he said, a bishop. And they look at him and say, you can't be a bishop because, you have to go through a lot of training and there's a lot of things you need to learn. You came from a private business. And he said, well, okay, let's do this. I am, or I was, a very successful businessman. I got a lot of money, but a lot of money. And I'll give you a lot of money if you give me the title of a, bishop. At least not necessarily the title, but the same importance, same level of a bishop. The church looks at the amount of money and say, yeah, oh yeah, deal. Let's do it. And Marcion becomes this one person, this individual, very influential because of his past activity. And he starts to, he goes a little bit more, I would say he goes deeper into the Gospels, studying a little bit more. And he concludes that of all the scripture available, the Gospel and the Gospels, several of them at the time, all of these things, everybody got it wrong. The only person that got it right was Paul, or Saint Paul, as they call now. So he said Paul was the only one who really understood this thing. So going back in time, in the year 140, he assembles what became his personal gospel. And his personal gospel was a version of Luke's New Testament, where he stripped everything that was not clear that it had to do with Paul. Plus, he added all the letters that Paul wrote. And that became his idea. This is the sacred book. This is what we have to study. Everything else is no good. So obviously, that's not what it should be. But he was, like I said, again, very influential. His ideas and he starts to dominate, marketing-wise, I would say. He starts to dominate the general population in terms of, yeah, we got to study this, we got to read this. This is the right thing to do. That is a typical, possibly the very first, I would say, outstanding false Christ. Because he was teaching something that wasn't really the original message. It was a combination, that there were some variations. He took parts of Luke's gospel out. He left part out. He didn't use any other teachings at the time, and they were all good. So that is a false Christ. Marcion, year 140. That is exactly why the church, it was a tremendous, you can imagine, a tremendous red flag for the church. And the church said, we need to be more careful. We need to pay attention to these individual people with power that, the same way Marcion is doing this, we might have more people doing the same thing. And that generates the idea of having the official Bible or Gospels at the time. So it all began with him because he was this first, I put first in quotes, the first really well-known false Christ. So after him, the church organizes itself in terms of literature, what books are supposed to be read, what books are no good. Then we get to it's a long story. We're not doing this today here. But they got to the selection of 4 Gospels and some of the letters of Paul and others. And that's what composes the New Testament. You will compose the New Testament officially in the year 376. Anyway, the church will become responsible for the dissemination of the message, right? They will be the ones, making sure people are getting to read the right thing, and there's no heresy. Everybody is on the same page. And that would be done using 3 different methods. First, sermons. We still do this today, right? We still do this today, sermons. So the priest or the religious figures in charge, bishops and so, they would come up front to a crowd, to an audience, and just preach. Number 2, scripture, reading scripture. And number 3, by examples. Let's reanalyze these 3 things. Number 1, sermons. Sermons means somebody is up front, they have an audience in front of them, willing to, learn the message, the lessons. But that person could have been teaching false teachings. It could be a false Christ in there. That's one possibility. Number 2, scripture. You see, 5% at the time, 5% or even less of the population could read and write. So having scripture available wasn't really doing much in terms of dissemination. What would do the trick is somebody that could read and write, and those were the top church people, bishops, and so these people would be able to read the scripture to the audience in the synagogues, and not synagogues, but in the temples. Now, what they are reading can be also biased. They can still be false prophets. And number 3, by examples. And we rarely saw those. Really difficult. That's why here and there, with time, more and more false prophets start to pop up in different places. Because, if you are doing these things being sermons or lectures, using a more modern word, reading scripture and explaining scripture to an audience, in theory, you have power. You have some power. You're in charge. So that would give these people, power. So a lot of people looking for power were doing this, but they had false claims. So throughout time, what we see is the teachings were manipulated. The original teachings of Jesus, they were manipulated. They were adjusted to personal interest of those people in power or groups in power. And with time, that starts to generate several denominations of Christianity, because each one is interpreting in a different way according to their personal interest, or for the group, the small groups. Today, it is estimated that we have 41,000 denominations of Christianity. But there's more. As you go along in history, we get to the year 1096. So that's 1,000 years after Jesus. A lot had happened. All these things that I've been talking about, they've been happening. False prophets pop up here and there. In the year 1096, something completely different takes place. Pope Urban II. Before I continue, what is a pope? Let's just make sure we all understand the same thing. A pope is a religious figure, the head of the Vatican. At the time, there was no Vatican, but at a head of the Church of Rome that would command all the other churches. Everybody was subjected to the orders coming from the Church of Rome. The Pope is that top figure. What was and what is still the same? The purpose of a Pope. What is it supposed to be doing? He's supposed to spread Christianity. He's supposed to disseminate the teachings of Jesus and make sure that everybody is teaching correctly and everybody is understanding correctly. That's basically, in very few words, that's basically the role of the Pope. It was and it is. So in 1096, Pope Urban II asks 60,000 Christians to go down to Jerusalem and assassinate the Islamic population. A Pope does that. Well, let's think about this for a minute. You take the gospel, you take the Bible if you want to, okay? Any Bible, any version to any language from any time. Where do you see Jesus recommending something like this? Not even close. Not even close. So this thing is not coming from Jesus. It's by no means resembles anything Jesus. Still, this is the Pope. That is a false Christ. That is a false Christ teaching something that was not coming from the original teachings of Jesus. And you go later on in history, 100 years later, past the Crusades, in the 12th century in France, we start something new called the Inquisition. The idea behind the Inquisition is to combat, to go after heresy and religious deviation, especially among the Cathars. But the thing is, going after these people, not in terms, it was not supposed, it shouldn't be in terms of violence or aggressiveness, let alone killing them in a fire. It was supposed to re-educate these people by saying, hey, listen, you're mixing up. This is not the original teachings. This is what you should be aware of. That wasn't done. So after 1,000 years of adjusting the message to their convenience, they forced everybody to follow that, which is the results of 1,000 years of stepping over and modifying the messages, the teachings of Jesus. And these people were killing those who didn't want to follow. Especially, you see, in the year 622, Muhammad, right, starts writing what is going to become the Quran later. So by the 12th century, Christianity and the Islamic faith were very mixed in the area. There was 600 years of Islamism. So, things get confused. People get belief systems mixed up. So the Inquisition tried to address that. I mean, the idea is correct. Let's address this so people don't mix up belief systems. But the actions were completely wrong. Where in any Bible of any translation of any time is it written something like this? Start putting people on fire if they don't agree with you, with your belief system, your personal belief system. It's nowhere, not even close to anything Jesus. So again, the whole thing about the Inquisition, the inquisitors, the great inquisitors of all across Europe, they were nothing more than false prophets and false Christs, per se. So what is this message that St. Louis that I mentioned in the beginning? What does he bring to us? It's an alert. It's a warning. He goes more or less like this. When you hear to somebody preaching or doing that kind of thing, examine the deeds. And this is what it says. Trust the ones with the highest degree of Christian virtues. For example, charity, indulgence, love. And the ones that, and the goodness that reconciles all souls. Because that's what these people, the highest degree of Christian virtues based people, they will do this. And these people, they add actions to support their words. That's exactly what Jesus did. He would say something and do it right there in front of everyone. So everybody could benefit from his teachings by listening to him first. Second, watching him live through whatever he spoke. And St. Louis continues, this is the ones you should trust, but there are the ones you should distrust. And he says, distrust the scribes and Pharisees. Always them, right? Distrust the scribes and Pharisees who pray in public squares, because they used to do that. Who pray in public squares, dressed in long robes. And why is that? Why should we distrust, or why is it he telling us to distrust these people? Because at the time, those were the ones praying or doing preaches in public squares and doing something else. They did not or ever whatsoever add any actions to support their words. So they would say one thing and do another. These people would claim to have the one and only monopoly of the truth. And that is not it. Nobody has a monopoly on the truth. Not you, not me, no one. You have to be at a very, very, very high moral standard to risk say something like that. Jesus, for example. So time goes by, things change. In modern days, do we see false Christs? A lot more than before in history. We see religious figures, politicians, people in power, people with money, all of these people doing things that are not even close to the original teachings of Jesus. If you look at our systems today, for example, the political system in any country, it doesn't matter. Political system, economic system, healthcare system, education, sports, anything like this. All of these systems, at one point, they started based on moral standards. All of them. Politics, economics. Politics starts, the way we know it, starts all the way in ancient Greece when, you had a lot of tribes. The tribes start to gather together, and the population is becoming, a lot bigger than before. So somebody says, hey, listen, if we do not organize our society, it's going to be chaos. So let's organize. Let's put some of us in charge of organizing, the society, and, make sure we all get a good life and everybody's under control. That's the idea before the politics. In order to put people in charge, we have to elect these people, we have to choose people. Are we going to choose the one with bad reputations, bad manners, bad past? No. You want the ones with high morality. So politics starts just like that. Same for economy. Who do we want in charge of our economies? Anywhere. It doesn't matter. We're not talking about one place, another place. Anywhere. We want those who have good moral standards. Healthcare, same thing. Education, same thing. Sports, same thing. And it goes. All of these systems started based on moral. When you set morality aside, all these systems dismantle. That is what's happening today. They are falling apart, all of them. They are imploding because what used to sustain and keep him going is gone. So in these systems, we don't teach by example anymore because there's no morality. And Allan Kardec tells us another thing. Among these false Christs, there are the invisible ones, the obsessors, the discarnates, those who are teaching us and leading us towards the wrong thoughts, producing ideoplasticities of things that are not happening. They're learning too. They are in their process. They're gonna have to offset their wrongdoings, but they are here. They're living with us. They're not visible, but they are part of our planet. So, understanding Jesus' teachings and where they come from is important for us to judge who are the good deeds and not. Spiritism explains that in a different way because it includes philosophy, and philosophy puts rationality over traditional theology, and it makes it easier to catch these false Christs. When you put rationality over traditional theology, you say, hold on, let me see this, let me research, I'm not sure. That's how knowledge comes about. And knowledge is everything. More knowledge, less possibility for us believing in false Christs. So knowledge is the key to everything. Now, to make it clear, false Christs arise in all denominations of Christianity, all, including Spiritism. That's why Kardec was very extremely meticulous about selecting the messages they were going to analyze, study, and later on got published into the Spirit's book and other books. He was extremely careful about that. So, to wrap up, I would throw up in the air this question here. Are we following the right leaders? If we were, we wouldn't be in the situation that we are today. It's almost as simple as that. We are not following the right leaders. We are following false prophets and false Christs. Gandhi, by the way, Gandhi used to say, there's one thing that I don't understand about the Christians, why they don't follow Christ. And I think that says everything. That summarizes everything. I don't think anybody could have said it more clearly than that. Why don't Christians follow Christ? It's almost shameful, although it's true. My friends, thank you very much for being with us tonight. Thanks for participating with us on this talk about the false Christs. You got the contacts here if you need to contact us for suggestions, comments, and questions. Thank you very much for participating. We will be here next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Be well.